Hey, my fellow veterans out there, how y'all doing today? Uh, hey, I'm actually in a fantastic mood today. I've been doing a lot of talks with congressmen and senators all day today and yesterday, and we should have some great news for you here in the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to spoil it yet, but we got something in the works, and it's going to help a lot of veterans. So But today's show is a fantastic show. So let's go ahead and let's get started, shall we? All right, everyone. Yep. For those of you on audio, this is Tim Hauser. I'm also known as the Gulf War Advocate. And today's guest is Michelle Horn. And she represents a fantastic organization called Fisher House. And yeah, folks, this is one heck of an organization that I hope everybody can get behind. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming on. This is such an honor. Because man, I really love this organization. Um, for our audience out there, can you explain what Fisher House is?
Yes, Fisher House is a network of houses where military and veteran families can stay for free while they're receiving medical care at VA or military hospitals. So they're beautiful homes with anywhere from 8 to 21 suites where families stay and can get away from the difficulties each day that they're dealing with and have a place for peace, and also build community within the houses and turn to their fellow guests and really have someone to lean on.
Oh man, it's fantastic. And in order to qualify for services through your organization, do the veterans have to be in the VA system, or
Yes.
can they? Yes, they do have to be in the VA system. Okay,
Yes.
and
But it's also for military. So if there's
mhm.
active duty military or anybody being seen at a military hospital. So, if you have your a military service member whose child is being treated, that family would still be eligible. And then for veterans, the same kind of thing happens. If their children are still, being seen in the healthcare system for, perhaps they're still considered a dependent and they're being seen at a military hospital, they would still be eligible to stay at Fisher Houses too.
That's fantastic. Now, is there a fee to stay at these houses, or is
There's
this
no fee
there's
for
no
the
fee?
guests. Yeah. So there is a minor fee that the military hospitals have. It's $10 a night, and we actually pay for that so that no guest will ever pay for staying at a Fisher House.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
Mhm.
And because man, I know from hearing other stories that yeah, that travel back and forth from hospitals, especially long trips, one, it's definitely taxing on the body, and two, it's extremely expensive. So this is one of the reasons why I really appreciate your organization, because man, it's really making a big difference with military families and veterans as far as the expenses of healthcare goes. Um, now, when the veteran or the military family um, decides that that's too much of a travel for them, how actually let me start with this. Is there a requirement on how far they have to be before they can stay at Fisher House?
Yes. So they have to be at least 50 miles outside of the area that the care is. So if they've been referred to a hospital, many times it happens for either people who are referred from their own close by medical center, and or they just live outside of the area. Some people, there's their VA maybe St. Louis, and they live 5 hours away from St. Louis, or um, you know they can be kind of in more rural areas or just cities where they just don't have a very large VA network. And so they can stay at the Fisher House. The way that they would find out about it is they just can really just go to fisherhouse.org and see where there's Fisher Houses where they are. So wherever their VA that they're being seen at, if they live more than 50 miles away from it, they can just go to the Fisher House website and you can look at the current houses. We're actually very soon to putting up a nice, easy to find map on our website. We're not quite there yet. But you can right now go to the list of current houses and find a location close to you. And then you just call the manager and they will walk you through the process. I mean, we all know the government, there's a little bit of difference at each site. So the best thing to do is get in touch with that manager.
All right. So now if a family never heard of Fisher House before and they're at a VA facility, does the VA facility actually have information?
I'm here. I've just got my coworkers here. I apologize.
That's quite all right. The audience they've heard my dogs plenty of times. So is there information at the VA facilities that they can pass on to the families?
Yes.
Even if the families don't even know about Fisher House?
Yes, they can go to all of the VA medical centers do have those social workers there that will help them find the Fisher House. And again, I'm so sorry for my dogs.
That's okay.
But all of the facilities do have social workers that can help them get enrolled in the Fisher House program. And it's really their caseworker that's going to help them and their patient advocates that are going to help them work through the process, which varies just a little bit at each hospital. But ultimately, it comes to they get in touch with the managers, they get them in the system, and they make sure that they have a good place to stay.
Oh man, that's fantastic. And now I saw some pictures of some of these houses. Now it looks as though like there's kitchen and like a living room and everything available to them.
Yes. Every house has common areas. So the idea of the houses is that basically there's usually 16 suites at most of the VA houses, and each suite has just a nice bedroom and a private bathroom. But then there's open areas where guests gather, and that's part of the magic that happens at Fisher Houses is that families come into a house and you might have someone who's at the beginning of their medical journey dealing with perhaps cancer or some sort of medical issue that might be a longer term issue, and somebody who's kind of been going through it for a long time. Maybe they're towards getting great news about the end of their journey, that they don't have to that they're in recovery and they're going to be okay. And many times those people turn to each other and they give each other advice, and they're able to really lean on each other. And when the stories aren't always happy, they're not always, good news stories. We have many veterans who are aging and they end up at Fisher Houses, or their families do, while they're in hospice at a VA center. So we go through so many stages of life at Fisher Houses, from babies that are in NICU and their parents are able to stay, minutes from the hospital, to veterans in hospice. We're there the entire time. We're there for veterans the rest of their lives. We're going to be there for them. And while they're there, they can turn to each other, they can be there for each other, which really makes a huge difference because they share their experiences, and just the number of stories where people have made amazing friendships of people they never thought they would have even had a reason to become close to. It's that military community that keeps going inside of a Fisher House. Yeah, so inside the houses, they have the common kitchen, which is, basically it's 2 kitchens in 1 with a huge island so that people can do what people do in kitchens and stand around the island, pour the coffee, make breakfast, and they talk to each other. There's a nice dining room, there's laundry facilities, and there's a living room and a sitting room, and so all of those areas, including the bedrooms themselves, are beautifully appointed. They are furnished with very comfortable furniture. It's not like a hospital. It's not like a barracks or a dorm room. It is truly a beautiful comfort home for our veterans who we believe deserve every bit that we can offer them because of everything that they've sacrificed and that their families have sacrificed.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Now, I know that you hope that the families interact with each other, and that I can see that being a very positive thing. Um, but if there isn't much, uh, if there aren't many families staying at the house, is there like counseling available or?
We do work, many of the managers work with the VA to find people. They look similar to what you do, wanting to match resources with veterans.
Mhm.
Sometimes I find that those managers are basically this whole resource directory in themselves. They talk to the VA and a lot of them take it upon themselves to bridge those gaps when somebody needs that counseling. We find that the discussions in the house are organic, and they happen between guests, but they also happen between the housekeeper and a guest. I had a gentleman, a soldier who was injured several years back, and he was staying at Fisher House, and he felt very much alone while he was there. It's very rare that someone stays without a family member, but he was in a kind of transition moment, and he was at Brooke Army Medical Center, which has a slightly
Mhm.
different policy because of the nature of the way that they serve service members and they care for service members. But he told me that it was the housekeeper every day walking in and just saying, "How you doing? How's your day?" And he said, "I don't even remember her name, but she just said hi to me." And he told me that he had some of his darkest moments. That was when he went through an amputation of his leg and
Mm.
was, dealing with a lot of mental stress. And those interactions with the staff, just knowing someone was there, made a huge difference. Made a huge difference for him, and he is still a great friend of Fisher House. We talk to him
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time because he shares his story, and having him do that impacts, the way that we can get the word out and tell people how important this resource is for them.
Now I know we've been talking about some of the services of Fisher House.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know the audience is gonna want to know: who founded Fisher House and how did they find it?
Yeah. So Zachary and Elizabeth Fisher, were the original founders of Fisher House Foundation. Zach had a history of being a builder in New York City, and he had been injured in a construction accident when he was young and could not serve for World War II. He was turned down, and that always bothered him.
Mhm.
Years later, he learned that the USS Intrepid was going to be scrapped, and that bothered him. But at this point, he was a very successful businessman and decided to find a way to rescue it. In the course of rescuing the Intrepid, which is now a major museum in New York City and a great place to visit if you're ever in town,
Mhm.
he got to know some people from the Navy very well, as you can imagine. And the chief of the Navy, Admiral Trost, became a good friend. And shortly, at one point, Zach said, "I want to do more. I did this hospital. Now, what else can I do?" He talked to Admiral Trost, and Admiral Trost said, "I'm going to ask the boss." So he turned to his wife, Pauline, and asked her, "What do the military service members and family need?" And she said, "We need a Ronald McDonald House for military and service members. That's what they need." She had seen some family members walking along, getting off of a helicopter to take care of their service member in at Bethesda, at the old Bethesda, when it was
Hmm.
just Bethesda at the Naval Hospital. And she was so worried about where they were going to stay because Maryland is not cheap. And she said they didn't have any place and they needed something. So Zach, who was a builder, said, I can do that. And he built the first 20 or so houses, 20 to 30 houses, just paying for them out of pocket because, like I said, he had done well. He continued to build, the need kept going, and eventually we became the foundation that now is sourced by funds that come from anybody who does fundraisers for us, from the kid with the lemonade stand to major companies. So we have a lot of supporters because they know this is important and it makes an impact, and it's something you can see. These are houses, they're brick and mortar, and you can see the impact when you walk through the doors. You can hear it when you meet a family, when you see I walked into the Washington, D.C. VA early on in my time at Fisher House, which I started just a few years ago. And I met a woman whose husband was not doing well, and she was very, very upset about it. But another guest had a daughter that was in the Children's Hospital near the DCVA. They were active duty. And this woman who was losing her husband felt this huge warmth because she always got to pick up this little girl and play with her, and it reminded her of having her grandkids there. And that's the kind of thing that you see. It's not always about talking about your stories. It's that hug. It's that moment that you can,
Hmm.
whether it's in a room by yourself where you can wrap yourself in a blanket and say, I'm not going to think about the hospital for these 5 minutes. Or if it's in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee and laughing about something that only other people going through what you're going through can get. Those are the
Yes.
moments.
Oh,
Those are
yes. And yeah, I agree with you that those hugs can go a long, long ways. Don't
Yeah.
need to say anything, but that hug. Matter of fact, I'm trying to start a movement because you know how everybody thanks veterans for their service, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes that can seem a little cold or forced by people,
Yeah.
because we hear it all the time now. So towards the end of the show, I normally end with, you know, hug your veteran. It might save their life one day. And I'm hoping people catch on to that because I think that hug will go a very long way, just like it does at Fisher House.
I love that. I'm going to keep that in mind for now on. I know
Oh,
one thing.
fantastic.
Our president of, or our, I'm sorry, our chairman and CEO of the foundation, Ken Fisher, who is Zach Fisher's great nephew. It's a real
Hmm.
family business,
Right.
from the Fisher brothers to Fisher House Foundation. Um, he always says, "Welcome home." Is what he says to our Vietnam vets. That's his,
Yes.
what he believes is very important, and I agree with him. Is, we did not treat our veterans well, and when they came home, and I say this, obviously I was not there, but as a veteran, as someone who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, I am so grateful to the Vietnam veterans who really, and the Gulf War veterans, but we have to thank our Vietnam veterans for demanding that when we came home from
Hmm.
the Middle East, whether it was Gulf War or Afghanistan or Iraq timeframes, they were the ones who made it happen, that we were treated so well, and that we
Yes.
continue. We have these, I know the work
Hmm.
you've done, work with the PACT Act, all of these kind of things happening right now. We have to be grateful to those veterans that came before us who really made these, who made these fights, who fought for us, and kept fighting past their service, for right. So it's great.
Now, besides just these houses, I understand that you also have programs to help veterans, or you work with other organizations that help veterans that have like PTSD.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on that?
We do quite a bit. One of the big programs we have, one of our main programs is the Fisher Service Awards, which is a grant program that we have that helps. It's a grant program for innovative nonprofits in the military and veteran community that are coming up with a creative program to help in the community, whether that is with jobs or mental health, which of course is a huge thing that we see a lot of,
Yes.
or even support for military spouses, for military children, all anything that's innovative, and that those are the Fisher Service Awards. We'll open those applications up in October, and I definitely encourage anybody to go to fisherhouse.org if they have a nonprofit, even if it's it doesn't have to be a big national nonprofit. We want to give this money to nonprofits that are making a difference in their community, that are doing things that they're helping to fill those gaps that sometimes our government can't fill. So we do that, but we also partner with a lot of organizations because we believe, and really, again, it's Ken Fisher, our boss, who leads us in this great way, that not every organization can be all things to all people.
Right.
It's about connecting people, and it's about bringing the strengths that we have to the table. There's your friends.
Yep. Those are my puppies.
Yeah. So, but we can all work together. And I love one example of how we've done this in the last couple years. We have our Hotels for Heroes and Heroes Miles program, which traditionally began with getting, we used donated points for hotels and miles for flights to get those, to get people to the bedside of their loved ones, or to put them in a hotel when there's not a Fisher House available. We still do that. That's still what those are used for. But we also found we can use them for other nonprofits to help them out as well. So there's a great program called Home Base up in in Boston, who does a very comprehensive mental health program with Harvard. Sorry, I don't want to get the hospital wrong, but they do a very comprehensive program. And then another program called TAP, which works with survivors. Well, TAPS identified that there was a group of people who really needed help, and it was actually survivors of military veterans who had committed suicide, and these spouses were really struggling. Home Base had the program, but there was no way to get them there, and there was no place for them to stay. So they called us, and we said, of course. So now we pay for the flights, we pay for the hotels, Home Base gives the service, and TAPS identifies the people who need the help. And that's how we can come together, right? That's how we can fight, the all of the problems that we have going on, is only if we come together and work on it as a team, as a community.
That's right. Yep, that's one of the goals of my organization, Veterans Assurance Network, is building a network of all these smaller nonprofits, so veterans and their families will learn about them and be able to utilize the services that they provide.
Yeah.
And just like Fisher House, and this is a lot more than just providing a place to stay. Because one of the things that my organization is trying to do is break the stigma of mental health of veterans. Veterans, you once being in active duty, if one of the people that you were stationed with, you find out they went to mental health, they got harassed, bullied, teased, the whole 9 yards about going to mental health. So that, at least with my generation, the Gulf War veterans, that kind of kept us from going to mental health. Yeah. So we're trying to break that stigma, because the more veterans that do go to mental health, I think it's going to make a big difference, not just for the veteran and their families, but for the entire country. So that is one of the reasons why I am so glad you guys do more than just provide a place to stay, because it sounds like not only are you helping veterans with their mental health, but the families that are dealing with the injuries and illnesses as well.
Yeah, I mean, this mental health crisis that our country is going through is so scary, but it wouldn't even be in the news if it wasn't for the fact that it's being identified as a crisis, as we're seeing it,
Hmm.
that it is okay to get help, and it is, that we need that, we all need it. Gosh, we've been through so much, as a
Hmm.
nation together, and I'm not even talking about anything political or anything like
That's
that.
right.
I'm just talking about the pandemic and,
Hmm.
and for us veterans, the trauma of being pulled out of Afghanistan and watching what has happened. And I'm sure for the Gulf War and Vietnam veterans to have these memories come back, all of these
Right.
things, because that's such, it's such a flashback of things that have happened. And,
Hmm.
it just brings back a lot of the difficult times. And what's amazing is that people can come forward and say, it's okay. I am allowed to talk about this. It is not being weak. I am still a
That's right.
strong person and stronger for coming forward and saying I need help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think our VA system, it gets a lot of knocks. I know a person coming out of the military I was actually a spokesperson. So I saw a lot of the things going on and watched it very carefully. Um, they had a lot of hard things, but I think they've put a lot of effort into these services, and it's interesting to see when I go to the VA hospitals just how much the individuals truly do care, and how
Yes.
much work's being done to revamp the VA and make sure there's a lot of mental health counseling opportunities. And I think we've all got our eye on that ball of and want to make sure that this is
Mhm.
something that stays in the forefront of our thoughts, for sure.
Matter of fact, here soon I'm having the director of the local uh, new vet center
Yeah.
uh, coming on to talk about that new program for the VA, and I think that might be something that your organization might want to get involved with, because I I know they actually provide um, services outside of their little facility as well, because
Yeah.
they got this big huge mobile van and everything. They travel all over the place. So
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll definitely have to take a look at, we work
mhm.
closely with the VA. When we build Fisher houses, we build them in cooperation with them. I mean, the whole concept is that a VA says we need a Fisher house. They send it up to the VA at, the national headquarters who validates that need. And then they send it to us and say, okay, here's all the required or all the houses that are on a needs list from the VA. Then start working the process of getting land identified at those VA centers. And the way that they do it is they give us the land after they've identified, and they say, here you go. Fisher House owns it free and clear. And
Oh well.
then that allows us to build the house exactly like we want. So we can make it to our specifications instead of having to deal with some of the red tape that can go through
Mm.
a government process. Once that's done, we take that house and we give it back to the VA for management. And I'll tell you, we are on we have house number 95 was just finished in Columbia, Missouri. We just turned that over. We've got San Antonio, Texas, getting a second house at the VA. Bay Pines, Florida, is getting a second house, and those are because the need is so great. We just started construction in Memphis. We're starting construction in Detroit, and then our 100th house is going to be in Atlanta, Georgia, and
Oh
so
wow.
we're all over the place. But even with all those houses coming, the needs list still has 20 houses on it. And
Mm.
some of that is that we don't let them give us 200 houses at a time. You know,
Right.
we have to take kind of consumable bites. Right?
Yes.
So, but we keep knocking it away, we keep working at it. We're not going to stop until every VA that needs a Fisher House has a Fisher House. And I keep saying VA because we did most of the military, early on.
Hmm.
Now the focus is the VA, but we do have houses. We have a house in North Chicago that's going to be for a joint VA and military house. So, that need continues for healthcare just the same way. I always like to think, well, if you feel yourself getting a little bit older every year, as every single person does, do
Yep.
you get better each year, or do you kind of need a little bit more help? And so, that need for veterans doesn't stop. And
Hmm.
that's one of my main goals, is to make sure that for Fisher House Foundation that we continue to educate everyone that the need doesn't stop because the so-called war is over. And I say so-called war is over not because it's not a war, but because it there's training accidents. There's all kinds. It's the over that's the part that I question. There's always people serving overseas. There's always training accidents. There's always illnesses. There's
Yeah.
always kids getting sick. There's always those things. And Fisher House will continue to be here for military families, and building more houses until we have enough capacity to take care of everyone.
Yes.
So we're
And
not slowing down.
and then with the passing of the PACT Act, and they're going to be building more facilities, and they're going to be specialized care at these facilities to
Yeah.
deal with these toxic injuries. I'm pretty sure this is going to, affect you folks as well.
Absolutely. Like I said, the need is not going to slow down. We've seen so many people, register. I know the big push was, boy, really, we've still got, I guess, a few hours if people want to do their intent to file today, right?
Yes. Hmm.
That's going on, and people will continue to register, hopefully, for a long time. But one of the things we do pay attention to the needs at houses. The houses are not, I can't call it 100% ADA compatible or
Hmm.
compliant, but they are just about. They have wide passageways, they have elevators, they have hard surface floors, so that wheelchairs are easily get through. The bathrooms have lower counters for wheelchair accessibility, all of those types of things. There's one minor thing having to do with a vision accessibility feature that we don't do in bathrooms. Beyond that, we have all the things are checked, all the blocks are checked.
All right.
And so, we have some houses actually that do specialize, or were kind of thought through. There's a couple of houses near some of the military facilities that specialize in PTSD and PTS, really, and those houses and TBIs. Those
Hmm.
A couple of the houses, we actually had medical professionals walk through the house to make sure there were no triggers in those
Oh.
facilities, because they were specifically for
Hmm.
service members dealing with TBIs. And we had a doctor look at one of the paintings, which they're actually custom paintings throughout all the houses, or many of the paintings are custom paintings, but they had a barn in a field, and it was just a big red barn. Looked pretty, looked nice, seemed peaceful
Hmm.
to everybody else. And the healthcare professional said, there's no window on that, and somebody could feel trapped looking at it. So we painted a window. I mean, we painted a window on it. We said we can
Hmm.
fix that. And that's the kind of thing we think through. Even the books that we have in the libraries are curated so that they don't have triggers, that they're, generally, now they're not going to be boring,
Hmm.
but we think through what are the things that could cause problems. And we have a company that works with us to do that. It's really fascinating. We have all these people that help choose artwork and the books, the furniture. They do things with so much compassion and care and hope to bring peace, and it really shines through. It really shines through.
Now, if there's young children staying at these houses, are there like activities and everything there for them as well?
Yeah, many of the houses do have playroom, or if not a playroom, because we don't have tons and tons of kids, they do have toys. We have a woman, actually a CNN correspondent, or a person at CNN. Her name is Cynthia Garcia. She lost her son, and in I want to say Iraq, but I won't. Please don't hold me to that. She
Hmm.
stayed at one of our very special Fisher houses, our only Fisher house like this. We have one Fisher house located at Dover, and the Fisher House at Dover is there only for family members receiving their loved ones, for the dignified transfer of remains. And she was there. She had her daughter there with her. And it was obviously a very stressful time for her. And there weren't a lot of toys, and she started a program with Comcast where they donate. They call them Adam's Corners with toys and
Oh,
books
yeah.
based on her son Adam, who was killed in action. So, but those are the kind of things that happen with this community, right? Like people want to find ways to give and give back and continue to make a difference once you've been touched in the military and veteran community. I mean, you were a service member,
Hmm.
you were in the Air Force.
Yes.
It's hard to get away from, and you really don't want to get away from just the passion that comes with our community. So,
Now, you had mentioned people donating hotel points
yeah.
and air miles. How does one go about doing that?
Yeah, really, we try to make it super simple. You can do everything at fisherhouse.org. If you go to our Hero Miles program, it tells you every airline is a little different, and we have several partners. And it walks you through the process for if you have United or Delta or Alaska. Those are three of our big partners. And you can hop on there and do donations that way. We have partners with hotels, like Wyndham is a big hotel. You can get on there and look at how I believe Marriott is on there as well. You can get on there and donate your points and check it out. Yeah, it's a great way to use those points up if you have a bunch sitting there from travel,
Yeah.
or if they're going to expire, as some points do. Feel free to use them for good. Donate them.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Now, if a active duty military member is single and there's a Fisher house near them, are that individual's parents allowed to stay at a Fisher house?
Yeah. So we actually really do not want anybody to stay in a Fisher house alone. That is generally not part of how the VA or the DoD like to have that happen. It's a very rare exception. So you're right. So what do they do if they're single? Well, it could be if they're an older veteran, it could be their children. If they're, it could be an aunt, it could be a cousin, it could be a sister, it could be your best friend. I met a guy in Chicago who he'd been going through some stuff, and his kids weren't able to stay with him while he was going through his medical treatment. So he called a guy that was a fellow veteran that they had started a business together like 20 years ago and run this campground. And he said, I knew that the one person that was organized and would keep me on task was my friend, And so
Hmm.
he didn't have to be a veteran, but he happened to be a veteran. They didn't serve together. It could have been his best buddy from elementary school. It really doesn't matter. We do kind of limit, you can't have like 20 people stay with you, but you definitely can have family with you. But it can be, if your family is really, a good friend or somebody who will keep you accountable, or whatever it is, then they're welcome. They're welcome. We just want you to have somebody there with you by your side, because there are tons of studies that show having your family or a loved one with you helps you heal. And our slogan, our words that we live by are, our family's love is the best medicine. And so we really truly believe that that makes a critical difference in your healing, just like families make a critical difference, not only on the physical side, but for your mental well-being as well.
Now, I know you do a lot of work with other organizations. There's one in particular that I am so happy to hear that you do um, coordinate with, and that is Creative Vets. How did you get involved with Creative Vets?
It's the kind of the chain of nonprofits. So one organization that we support is called Tee It Up for the Troops, who's out of
Mm-hmm.
Minneapolis, and they do a great event where they bring military service members together who have been apart from a while. So people apply to this outing. It's a golf outing, Tee It Up,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, I would like to participate in reunion weekend. They reunite them with somebody that was they served with, and it could have been 5-10 years since they saw them. Everybody, and all vets, Vietnam vets, Gulf War vets, all eras. I was at the Tee It Up for Troops event where we help with, we sponsor some parts of that. And they had invited an organization called Creative Vets to come. And one of the programs that they put on at this kind of this 4-day workshop and golf outing was to have several veterans sit down and put together songs through Creative Vets. And then they took their spouses who came along on this trip and they put together a spouse song. And I was so inspired. The last night they have a dinner and they played these songs. And I thought, there's so much healing happening here. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much. And you see these guys, mostly a few of us women were there as veterans, getting to share their moments through golf, which is a great activity for, you know it's very cathartic. You get to get out there, and it's not that stressful, or you can make it not that stressful. But even for the people who had other things that aren't sports, that aren't physical, they were getting really into everybody was getting really into the music, and I love seeing that. And people were really inspired who never played music or had never been involved. And I love to hear more about what they did outside of the Tee It Up for Troops organization. So I called them and I said, hey, tell me more. And I called up the person who manages our Hero Miles program. And I said, hey, this is somebody we gotta do some stuff with these guys, because they're making a
Mm-hmm.
difference. So now we take care of their flights. That's what we do with flights and hotels. We work with them and we make sure that people can get to to the work they do, and they can partner together. And I think they spend like a week together, and they work with musicians to write these songs, and then learn to play the guitar or piano,
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
they do a whole bunch of other stuff, photography, all kinds of neat creative ways to really get those get that healing process moving.
Yeah, I had Creative Vets on when I first started this podcast, and they're going to be coming on again here real soon.
They're
And
awesome.
well, one of the ways I deal with my PTSD is through my photography and my painting. So
Great.
once I heard about Creative Vets, I had to dive in and find out what they were all about, and that's another really good organization. Um,
And in a similar way, I deal with a lot of my stress. I started taking piano lessons a year and a half ago,
oh,
and
there you go.
I didn't do it through a veteran organization, because I was lucky enough to have some opportunity where I live to do that. But it's an incredible way to find those outlets, to find
Hmm.
those ways to express yourself. And whether it's golfing or canoeing or horseback riding or painting, I think it's really important for people to know that there's so many organizations that are offering these kind of services. Um, and if your listeners have those organizations,
Yes,
they should apply for our Fisher Service Award, because they
there
have
you go.
our grant program that we'd love to help
Hmm.
out with.
Now, since we kind of mentioned Um, Music. Are there like any instruments in any of your facilities?
There actually are. We have a number of country music stars that we've worked with over the years. A lot of country because we work with a country music woman who puts on a radio show for us
Mhm.
that helps get the word out about Fisher House. But they actually like to donate their like guitars to Fisher Houses. So many of
Oh,
them
okay.
have guitars, and people will grab them off the wall and go ahead and play, so there's not a piano or anything huge like that, but there actually
Mhm.
are guitars in a lot of Fisher houses. So
All right. That'll work. Um, Now, how did you personally get involved with Fisher House?
I really I would say I'm probably the most fortunate person leaving the military. When I retired in 2019, somebody said, "Hey, have you ever thought about working in a nonprofit?" And I was like, "Oh, maybe." And then they said it's Fisher House, and I said, "Well, that's another story." So I immediately said, "Tell me more," because I knew what Fisher House was. I was lucky enough to know what it was from. I had service members when I was in leadership roles that stayed at Fisher House. And so I knew the goodness. I didn't know everything that Fisher House did. But I was quick to apply, and it was a good match.
Mhm.
And I absolutely love getting to help military and veteran families. I did find that after leaving the service, there was this. I always called it the rest of the story, because when you're in the service and your people are injured, you don't always hear how does it all end up, how are they doing. Coming into the Fisher House world, I suddenly got to see, and sometimes actual people who were in units, in like the 82nd. I was in the 82nd, so I actually got to meet people who were in units that I had served in, that had what they were doing now, and they were still being able to use the services that Fisher House offers and others. But I just it's the rest of the story where you really see this doesn't stop when you take off the uniform, right?
That's
Keep
right.
going. Yeah.
Hmm. And if is there like a, I want to make sure I word this correctly so I don't offend any of our audience. Um, is there a time where at night that like the not necessarily lock the doors, but there's like a curfew? So
We do have rules, yeah. And
mhm,
I don't say we, the VA does. There are rules about Fisher houses, but there are also because they're located near VA hospitals, and they don't have. There is the ability for people to come on and off campus. There are security systems. The doors are always locked. Every guest wears an ID that says they're a Fisher House guest. They have a key to get in. They have keys to their own rooms, of course. So they are secure places. There's not really a curfew, but there are some rules, like there's no drinking inside of a Fisher House,
mhm,
just to maintain the safety of everybody there. There's certain things that are shared when somebody checks in, and we adhere to the VA policies because it is a VA campus, so they have to kind of abide by those rules. But as far as, anybody who can be seen by a VA or military hospital, regardless of the type of family they are, you know, what their service was, Coast Guard, all those kind of things. It doesn't,
mhm.
everybody's welcome. You can come, as long as you're being seen by a VA, you're welcome. We want you there, or referred from a VA.
Yes, yes.
So, like I said, the 50-mile rule is the only limit that we have for distances. And that's and even that sometimes depending on the location. I mean, I live in Washington, D.C. 50 miles in DC is more than 2 hours,
Yeah.
because of the traffic here. So,
Yes.
there's things that can be discussed depending on the situation.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the last base I was stationed at was the former George Air Force Base, which is up in the high desert, just on the other side of the mountains from San Bernardino,
Yeah.
which means we were about 20 miles from LA, but it takes 4 hours to get there.
Absolutely. You know what I'm talking about. That's for sure.
Yes.
But, in the time that we've been around, Fisher House has saved more than 455,000 families,
Oh,
with more than $575 million. So, and we're excited because we think in the next 10 years we'll cross over the $1 billion mark. So,
mhm.
this is a savings. This is a huge savings for military families, and it keeps them from having to pay those out of pocket costs. And then that stress comes off your shoulders, right?
Yes.
Just
Hmm.
focus on care. Focus on your loved one. That's what we want.
I think that is one of you just hit an extremely important point here. Um, when until a veteran gets to a certain level of service connection, even through the VA, they have to pay for that.
Yeah.
So if they have to travel a long distance, this is folks, this is why I truly love this organization, because you're trapped. Well, you have to get there,
Yeah.
but if you fly, you might not have to pay for it.
Yeah.
You can stay at one of these facilities for free, and that's got to eliminate a lot of stress.
I met my boss, Dave Coker, the president of the foundation, told me about a veteran that came up to him at a Fisher House, and he said, "Thank you for saving my life." And Dave said, "Well, I didn't do anything." And he said, "I had I have cancer, and I needed to travel, and it's 7 hours away." And my wife said, I she wasn't able to go. They wouldn't be able to afford a hotel, so she just said, "We can't do it." And I didn't want to be apart from her. I needed her with me. And so this veteran had decided that he was just going to ride it out and not get care for
Mm,
his cancer, you know. And that was the way he felt about it until he learned about Fisher House. And then his wife was able to come with him, and he was able to get the care he needed. So, it
very
really
awesome.
is life or death kind of situations. And sometimes it's just routine care. But,
Mhm.
it's a safe place for people to stay where they know that they can trust the people around them, and they can focus on the love that they need to give their loved ones.
Yes, yes. Um, Now we're kind of getting towards the end of the show here, and I kind of explained this to you, and a lot of my audience already knows what's going to happen. But I am big on showing this every Wednesday. Folks, 988, then press 1. Remember, it used to be 1-800, and then you couldn't remember the rest of the phone number. So you got frustrated and just didn't call. And then that ended up causing a lot more pain to families. 988, very simple to remember. Press 1. You are now guaranteed to get a live certified counselor on the line with you. You don't even need to be thinking about harming yourself or somebody else. If you just need somebody to talk to help you get through the day, dial 988, press 1. Counselors there, they'll understand what you're going through, they'll be able to help you out. Um, and the thing I said during the intro kind of has something to do with this, folks. But once I get more information, then we'll let you know. Um, Now, to get in contact with Fisher House, they can go
Yes.
to fisherhouse.org. And I think is that the correct email address for people to use as well?
Yes, absolutely. We check that email regularly. I get emails forwarded to me all the time on it to work on. So, yes, please go to fisherhouse.org, Find your local Fisher House. You can get involved if you'd like. If you just want to get involved, you can call the local Fisher House. They can help with volunteer activities. You can learn ways to donate or fundraise, but most importantly, you can learn ways to get help. So we're here for you.
Then there's one slide that I had made for this, but I forgot to put it up here. So I'm going to go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
And here it is, folks. Fisher House Foundation builds comfort homes where military and veteran families can stay free of charge. Underline that, free of charge, while a loved one is in the hospital. All right. This has got to relieve a lot of stress for you folks out there. And then one last slide I'm going to show here isn't kind of related to what we've been talking about, but I also show this too. This is the new foundation, or the new organization is called Veterans Assurance Network. They are joining forces with other organizations such as Fisher House to get the information out to you veterans and your family members on other organizations that offer fantastic services to veterans and their families. Normally, people wouldn't hear about these organizations because they're small, but they do some fantastic work. So if you're unsure on who to go to for certain type of aid, get a hold of Veterans Assurance Network. They will help find somebody that can help you out. No problem at all. Also, what they're doing too, we are looking for veterans that are on home oxygen and cannot afford or have a need for a portable oxygen concentrator so you can get your mobility back. I don't have my oxygen on tonight. I don't need it most of the time when I'm sitting. But while I was advocating for the PACT Act, I couldn't go to Washington, D.C. for my first trip there because I was on home oxygen 24 hours a day. VA only gives you tanks. You can't travel with tanks. Tanks only last like 2 hours. Then you can't carry enough tanks when you travel across the country. So we want to help veterans get their mobility back. So if you are on home oxygen or know a veteran that is, and they could use a portable oxygen concentrator, like an Inogen, get in contact with us and we'll help that veteran out. And Michelle, this was an absolute honor having you on the show.
Oh, the honor's all mine. Thanks for all you're doing. It's incredible.
Oh, thanks, but just a tiny little bit. It's people like you that are making the huge differences. So once again, thank you so very much. And folks, I do not have a guest lined up for next week yet, but we will have a show every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So just keep on checking, and we'll see you next Wednesday.